I am
Welcome
not
back.
hearing the squirrel voice.
That's perfect. Welcome back to Texas and Tomahawks. I am Adam Dorito, and I am here with Colorado Representative for House District 22, Ken DeGraff, who's also an Air Force Academy grad. And that's just like the second guy in a row this week, and I'm super excited to talk to him. Ken, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Excellent. Thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me.
So you know what, Ken? Everyone wants to know because obviously you're a USAFA guy. What convinced you that it was a good idea to go to our alma mater? And when you were a young strapping man who wanted to serve his country, what made you think that that was a good idea?
Well, when I was a junior in high school, I didn't even know it existed. I thought the Army Navy game was between the soldiers. Didn't have any idea what that was. I did the whatever test like pre-SAT, and then I got a letter from West Point, and they said, "Well, we'd like you to apply." And I said, "Well, what's West Point?" And then somebody said, "Well, if you should you should apply to the Air Force Academy." So that's how I learned about about the Air Force Academy, and then I went to a thing up in Alpena, Michigan, where I actually worked later on as part of my career, and saw an F4 and fly by, and it's like, that's what I want to do. I'm done applying to the Army. I want to go fly. I want to go fly jets. So serving the country. My dad was in the National Guard, and so that was always, I guess, being a soldier, serving the country. It was, but it was jets.
Okay, but see, the only time I've ever been able to see an F4 fly, right, versus the static display was when Robin Olds died, and they brought over a squadron from like one of the last remaining squadrons from like Germany that were still flying him, and they did his flyover over the USAFA grave sites, and I was like, that is one loud jet, and it is ugly,
Oh yeah.
and it just has a giant engine in it to keep it moving through the air. I mean, that must have been cool, like growing up in like the early '90s, where we still had all these really cool aircraft, like the F-14 was still flying, like all those different types of aircraft.
Yeah, the A7s used to fly over
A7s.
and then when I was at Holloman, during my last tour, I was able to get a ride. They had the F4 still on the test squadron, and I was able to get a ride so I did get a ride in the F4.
That's
and
awesome.
then I didn't try hard enough. I didn't prioritize it to go do it again. And then they kind of shut down the pipeline. But it was, I've flown in F-15s, F-16s, A-10s, obviously. It was a different feeling. I mean, it's kind of like being in like a really heavy classic metal, 50s car, right? It just felt like this massive, solid, it is kind of like pushing a brick through the air and making it fly, but it was a different feeling. It's not like those other planes feel rickety or anything like this, but this was just, it was different. It was a really neat experience to be able to do. So very, and then, just knowing, the history of the F4 and just, it was quite moving.
This is quite the battle queen that nobody wants to talk about. That and the F-105 Thunder Chief, right? Like just classic aircraft that were never meant to fly. But you give enough. It's kind of like today. You give enough money to these government agencies, they'll put a big engine and a long enough runway and anything from Republic will get off the ground. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So our 13,000 foot runway when I was flying KC-135s, you would rotate. This is the A model. You'd rotate. I think it was about like 3,000 feet, and you'd break ground at about 1,500 feet remaining, and it's a 2-mile long runway. And that thing those things just struggled to get off the ground. So the joke at the time, like for an alert launch, would be that the number one jet would be the sacrificial, and everybody else would just climb on the fireball. So.
That actually makes perfect sense. That's exactly what the Air Force would do. I mean, one of my good friends, he was a F-15 guy too, C-5 guy, going to Afghanistan in 2003, and then he always said, he's like, man, I flew the fastest, sexiest aircraft that the Air Force ever developed, in the Gulf War, and then I came back and flew the biggest, fattest, ugliest thing, and I don't even know how that thing got off the ground half the time. You know what I mean? It's just like science, right? Like even like the SR-71 program, just a fascinating technological marvel at the time. Like let's just put enough money into something and see what happens.
They didn't even know how to mill titanium when they bid that. They're like, yeah, we're going to make a jet out of titanium. And then they got the bid and they're like, does anybody know how to work with titanium? And they're like, nope. Nobody knows how to work with
They
titanium.
had to
It's
hire
not-
specialized like civilian welders to come in and do that and like tell them like, hey, you can't talk about this, right? If I remember correctly, like it was some like super secret squirrel program with a bunch of guys smoking cigarettes and doing cocaine in the back room, basically discussing on how to like find these dudes. So like, all right, we're gonna bring him in. Why? Well, he's the only one who knows how to weld this. Okay, well, we don't have no idea what you're doing, and they're just like just chain smoking and figuring this out, right? Like. So that was good. That was the golden years of America plane building, Ken, is this cocaine and cigarette smoking. And look, we built the B-52. We built the Apache. I mean, we had all these awesome aircraft come out of the space shuttle. You know what I mean? You couldn't do it without coffee, cocaine, and chain smoking, apparently. Maybe the Boeing engineers today should reconsider getting back to their forefathers because they keep trapping people in space and blowing doors off of aircraft. So.
Yeah, maybe their engineers need to stop going to the gym and break out the coffee and cigarettes.
I completely agree with that philosophy. So, Ken, what was your time like at USAFA? You get there, you had no idea what it was going to be like, and you thought the Army-Navy game was a fight between the soldiers, which that's hilarious to actually think about that. So you get to USAFA, like what's it like for you? What was that entire process like? Let's see if it was any different than my experience, because probably not after every grad I've talked to.
Yeah, probably not. It was, it just overwhelming. And I just, I still remember, waking up in my rack and, somebody screaming in the hallway and just like, this is now my new normal. This is it. And just kind of hunkered down and was, it was, I'd say I was pretty much in awe of the opportunity of the privilege that it was to do that. So, I was convinced that, I couldn't figure out how everybody else could like go and do stuff that was fun, because I figured I had to do the absolute best I could in absolutely everything. And, so my GPA as a freshman started up pretty high, and then it kind of went down every semester after that. So
yeah, especially after physics 215, it just catastrophically goes after that. But I'm so smart, and then you get there like I'm not as smart as I thought I was.
Yeah, I did have one class where the instructor in engineering, in one of partial differential equations, or it was differential equations, maybe it was partial, and they said, maybe this major is not for you. And, fortunately I figured out how to, my friend Boz, who I always had better grades than him, except in this class, I asked him and he said, oh yeah, I just go to a different instructor for extra instruction. And then, and that's how I get through. So that was my ticket to pass that class. And I actually worked with him some at the Air Force Academy when I came back to teach. So I got to tell him that, like 20 some years later that, he was the Captain Keenan, I think. He was actually the instructor that, got me through. And then from there, I was able to go to Columbia University on a Guggenheim Fellowship. So
that's awesome. Yeah. It's really admirable, because a lot of grads, like they're like, I'm never coming back to this place. I hope it burns down the second I leave out the North Gate. And now it's just really great to see when grads actually come back and participate in, not necessarily the AOG, because that's a whole nother discussion we could have. Thanks, Michael Gould. But coming back and then actually giving back to the cadets and actually teaching the next generation of warfighters, I think that's awesome. And the Academy has gone through so many dynamic changes over the last several years. They need that to see that experienced guys who did fly in the early parts of the war and everything else and had all this experience. And I just think it's super admirable that you came back and do that and had a good influence on the cadets that are flying today, because they need it. They need the leaders. They need men and women of character to actually teach them how to be good officers. And, like I said, the last few years, they just haven't been having it. So what was your flying career like, Ken?
The sense of smell, like if you go up and, go to the freshman stairwell,
yeah,
the smell is the same.
Nice. That nice
so it was
PT shirt, like half Clorox floor from like, yeah, got it.
Yeah. I don't know what the smell was, but it was like, it triggered like the exact same memory of when I was a SMAC. So I know it was the same. And it just, kind of like there's so much of walking around there and you just feel like you're always going to be in trouble. It's like, I'm a freaking lieutenant colonel. I can go anywhere I want. Nobody is going to ask me anything. And you still have this idea of, if I go here, what if I'm not supposed to be here? I'm not, am I going to get in trouble? And so there, that always that sense of foreboding over you. So it's kind of funny that just so.
Even when I went back for my 10-year reunion, that's exactly what it was like. I was like walking into my own room and I'm like, oh God, it's got that. You get that feeling of like, where's my AOC? He's going to come back and yell at me.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know what's funny, Ken? Did you know that if you call freshmen at the Air Force Academy today smacks, it's considered hazing?
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, it sounds like a great time. So what?
Soldier minus ability, coordination, and knowledge.
Yep. And you can't say it anymore because it's considered degrading.
That's the point.
I know, but these are the stories. These are the stories I have to hear from cadets today who are just like, oh my God, the Air Force Academy is doing all these dumb things, and I have to sit there and listen. Like, I'm not trying to say like back in my day when it was hard, but I just sit there and just go, what are you guys doing anymore? Like, you know what I mean?
Well, if somebody's a SMAC 1 year, they're the soldier minus ability, coordination, and knowledge, and then the next year they're no longer a SMAC. That means they are a soldier with ability, coordination, and knowledge. Is like that should be the affirmation they need. The only reason it'd be derogatory is if they don't stick it out.
Exactly. I just think it's a lack of some of the guys coming in to lead the academy who have like no common sense and are just too wrapped up into the woke gender culture or whatever else is going on in the military today. And like I said, it's affecting the warfighting mentality for sure for a lot of cadets. And it's unfortunate. But so you get out of the academy, you survive it. Where did you go fly? What planes did you fly? Where were you yanking and banking?
Well, I went to Columbia University at first for grad school, and then in that time frame, they went and they started banking. So halfway through, when I went home for Christmas, I opened a letter from the DoD and it said, "Oh, by the way, you're not pilot qualified because you had an abnormal EKG." So that took like another 6 months to square away. And what it turns out is just my heart rate was below 50. My resting heart rate was below 50. So that triggers this is, my first experience into the bureaucracy. So they just threw it in a pile, said abnormal, not pilot qualified. So nobody knew why my EKG was abnormal. So I had to do like 3 or 4 EKGs before one doc finally just said, "I think it's this. And so I'm going to sign it off." But he was very nervous about it because he didn't know. Nobody wrote it down like why it was abnormal, just that it said abnormal. So I did that. And then I got a call from, I called personnel and said, "Hey, I did grad school. So the Air Force Academy said I'm supposed to go to Reese." And they said, "Well, you have nothing to do with the Air Force Academy anymore. So we're going to send you to Laughlin." So I went to Laughlin, and then from Laughlin, I went and flew KC-135As. And then I upgraded or transitioned to KC-135Rs, and then I went to T-37s. They closed the squadron at Minot, and so then I went over to T-37s, which worked out great for me because I wanted to fly upside down. And when I graduated, there were no fighters in the drop, so fighter was not an option. So trainer was the best option I could. And then when I couldn't stay in the T-37 anymore, there was a job opening to Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan to fly CT-114s. And I thought I would never go that far north again in my career, farther north than Minot Air Force Base. So, but we did. We went to Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. I flew tutors. And then they said, "Well, we're going to send you to upgrade to aircraft commander, and then we're going to upgrade you to instructor pilot, and then we're going to send you to the Pentagon." So I thought, I don't like the sound of any of that. So
I don't like the sound of any of that.
Yeah. So I applied for test pilot school, and they were fairly sure I'd get in because I had a master's in the dynamics of indeterminate structures. And but then it's like, okay, that's cool. And then they're like, but you'll be a KC-135 and test pilot, like, flying refueling the F-22s and doing all that. It's like, okay. So I got out, went to the airlines, did that. Year later, got furloughed after 9/11. I was, that happened while I was home and in the process of getting ready to head to the airport. And then happened to get picked up to fly A-10s for Battle Creek Air National Guard, contingent on getting the anthrax shot, which I didn't know anything about, and ended up getting picked up to fly A-10s, and then took an AGR active guard job, which took me out of flying. But then I was starting to fly missions getting checked out to fly missions for the Coast Guard in a civilian aircraft. And then I went to Germany a couple times, and a buddy of mine said, "Hey, there's this job to Holloman Air Force Base. You could fly T-38s and be the support group deputy." And I was like, "I'll do that." And he's looked at me like, "You would drag your family to Holloman Air Force Base to fly T-38s?" I was like, Yes, I would.
Yes, I would.
And they had a German school there. And we were able to put our youngest son in German school because he had been in German kindergarten and pre-K there. And then our older son got accepted into the German school. So they ended up learning, being fluent in German, which is a great opportunity. And then let's see, after that, and so at Holloman Air Force Base, I was standing up 2 squadrons to be a MQ-1, MQ-9, and then flying T-38s. Eventually, I got checked out in the MQ-9 instructor pilot. And then the sequestration nonsense of Barack Obama, I was applying to the test squadron there at Holloman Air Force Base to do that. And they kept saying, "Well, you're not qualified, so we didn't read your resume," which meant I wasn't in the civil service. I wasn't in the GS side, so I wasn't qualified to become a GS. So, and then all of a sudden the Air Force Academy job came open. And they wanted a PhD who was in the Air Guard. That was a pilot, not, so I applied. I wasn't a PhD. And then, when I talked to them, they basically said, "You're the first guy that's applied that's qualified." So, it's okay to be in the bottom of the barrel if you're the only one in the barrel, I guess. So I got the job at the Air Force Academy, then flew T-53s, which was a really good experience, and then with the cadets, and then taught calculus, and then retired. So I had about 25 active duty years, 27 good years overall, and then during the COVID fiasco, then I was asked to run to be a House District Representative, and I can tell you that was never on my list of things to do, and it is still not on my list of things to do.
I was gonna say, I'm like, so you do have this awesome flying career, you do all these cool things in your life, and all of a sudden, like, even you're back at your alma mater, you're giving back to the community, and then it's like, "Hey, how would you like to get involved in politics?" And you're just like, "This."
I would not.
This is my experience. Even with just getting involved in politics locally here recently, it's like raccoons fighting in a dumpster over a melted ice cream cone behind Mitch's all the time.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the best comparison I can give it. It's just like you just watch this dumpster fire of raccoons fighting all the time. And I just don't understand it. And I'm so glad that we got to connect and start having these conversations about what are the policies and discussions that need to be had amongst the people of Colorado, because we had some offline discussions before we started talking about here about this podcast, but the energy policy, the carbon issues, the electric vehicle issues in Colorado. And you're one of the few representatives that can actually say, "I actually know how to do math, and I can actually talk about these things in an educated manner and actually talk to my constituents about these are the policies that are costing you millions of tax dollars a year because you have a bunch of people proposing laws and ideas that are just completely nonsensical." But, like I said, you pull the wool over the sheep's eyes, so to speak, for long enough, it turns into like this giant money laundering schemes for people who are only self-interested. And you have lived a life of service throughout your country and in the Air Force and flying, and you're even a pilot now still. And you're just basically, from my opinion, a normal dude that's just trying to walk in and go, hey, stop. Let's think about this for more than 5 minutes. But you can't fail people on their GRs in public service like you can at the academy, Ken. So.
No, and as Scott reminds me that you also cannot slap stupid, but I think that would be a
to start calling people smacks in the middle of
No, I'm talking about smacking stupid. I think smacking stupid would be because some people obviously did not get get enough noogies and have that social engineering that goes along with like what you're doing is stupid and stupid should hurt.
Yes.
And unfortunately, a lot of what the stupid that goes on there, and talking about Proverbs 12:1 kind of stupid, is that it hurts other people. It hurts other people greatly. And and that's one of the reasons that I continue to pursue the energy stuff, from the carbon dioxide standpoint, because it's like, well, there's there's just the drumbeat that they have heard over and over and over again, and it's going to take hearing that over and over and over again, and so that's why we break it down. And in fact, Meg Froelich, I wish I remembered where it was in the thing, but I was talking and I, said, go through the math quickly again. And so that, your carbon footprint is one half of, the equivalent, mathematical equivalent of one half a drop in 20 Olympic sized swimming pools full of drops. And she was mouthing that off to the side, standing off to the podium. So I swing the microphone over to her and have her say it. So it's like, so they know. I mean, they can do, they've done the math. So, I mean, they still have a level of doubt, but, like I told you, the reason for doing the breakdown like it is, I mean, if you want real climate science, you go to CO2 Coalition and Clintel and stuff like that. And mine's very little on the science side, except for the 10%, but it's to dumb it down past fifth grader level and get down to willfully ignorant politicians. So
yes.
In talking to like Manny Rutinel, and he's like a climate justice warrior, and so he's got all access to all these people that have supposedly some climate knowledge. And it's like, well, why don't you get this falsify this for me? So, and I've sent that to everybody, and nobody's falsified it so far. So I'm pretty confident. So I'm more confident in it now. When I sent, when I talk to the governor's office, I mean, I don't talk to the governor, but when I talk to the governor's office, email them, ask for an answer. Like when I did the Cora, they defer to the energy office. The energy office, Dr. Tour just said, well, basically I'm just the messenger. I'm just executing these rules and regulations that the legislators put in. So then I put the question to the legislators, like, what is it? And as you've seen from the Cora files, that there is absolutely no basis for there's no basis at all for the climate goals. So like, even like if you go to the documents they reference and then dig down to the documents that the references reference, you don't get to any sort of goal. There is no goal. The only goal is, and so it's fascinating to me that, nobody has, none of these people actually put in the time to think about, like, what does this achieve? And they just look at you like, I don't know. It doesn't, it does. And then they'll just, without even skipping a beat, without any, they'll just go on and but if we reduce carbon dioxide, we'll meet our climate goals. Like, well, what are our climate goals? Well, we don't know. So that's on the energy, somewhat on the energy sector, so, and then they'll say, well, we need to get rid of the pollution. So to get rid of the pollution, we have to get rid of the CO2. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. You can get rid of, like, you're getting rid of sulfur in the gasoline, which was, not a great thing to have pumping through the atmosphere, perhaps. I don't, whether it was as bad as everybody says. I mean, they go from one thing to another. It's like, how many times have they cried wolf, and then, that it's been false. And then, so it's difficult to know what one is true. So, because ultimately when you burn hydrocarbons, you get carbon dioxide. If it's a pure hydrocarbon, you get carbon dioxide and water, and both make plants grow. And so when I asked the DNR, and I said, can you tell me how carbon dioxide is a pollutant? And the head of the DNR, Director Gibbs, seemed pretty uncertain as to what, like, photosynthesis was, and that carbon dioxide was useful for photosynthesis. And then, he took part of a definition. So I'm waiting for him to get back to me. I've got to dig through some emails. I should look for his, but like, how exactly is carbon dioxide a pollutant when it's not physically harmful below like 8 to 10,000 parts per million, which is 20 times higher than what we are. And they don't know, and they don't care, because it's just, from USAFA, I think I'm sure if you're looking for an excuse, any excuse will do, right? So it doesn't matter how flimsy.
They're trying to get partial credit on all their test scores. You know what I mean? Like, they're just like, okay, I have no idea how to solve this problem. I know I'm going to get it wrong. But if I can at least get like at least 40% of the problem processed correctly, I will pass this class. And I think that's how this
and that's fair from a GR standpoint.
Yeah,
it's like, at least you're going, if you're going in the right direction, I can give you some points.
Yeah, get you some points, and then everyone gets a 30% curve, everyone gets a 68. Congratulations, you're not on ACT Pro. I mean, but I feel like that's who's like running the government right now. So
no, they're not that smart.
Yeah.
They're savvy. They're politically savvy, but the scientific knowledge is low. Mathematical knowledge is low.
So all the documents you sent me over yesterday, I think everybody knows here, like, I'm an oil and gas guy. I work in the energy sector. That's my area of expertise. This is what I do. And I read through all the documents that you sent me yesterday. And I think one thing that really stuck out to me is like the false credentialism of everything that you sent me. So basically, these people will come out, they'll try to make some kind of argument. They'll make it all look pretty on graphs and charts or whatever else it is, because most people can't read graphs and charts, because most people, I mean, no offense, like you said, you got to dumb it down to the level of a fifth grader, right? And that's for the general population, right? It's got to be quick. It's got to be less than 30 seconds. It's got to have pretty colors. And then they do these reference points. I'm going to cite this article, or I'm going to cite this news source, or I'm going to cite this statistic. And then you are correct. You go into that statistic and that scientific article, and then you realize, oh, this is a politically motivated group that actually is not even an actual scientific organization. And then they try to reference their own stuff. So I think the problem is people are lazy. People are incredibly academically lazy. And look, I'm not the smartest guy. I barely squeaked through on academics at the Air Force Academy, but I think I've done pretty well for myself, when I went into the engineering sector in oil and gas later on. But I wasn't being hounded with like having to run the strips and whatever else either in the civilian world. It's weird how that happens. But
yeah.
But you're looking at like the like what, over 200 like page document you sent me on that the Cora and whatever else. And I'm reading through it and I'm just like, there's people out there that actually believe what this says. There are people,
and it doesn't say anything. It doesn't. They don't actually say anything.
Here's whatever it was, 187 pages or whatever it was, and it says nothing. It says nothing. Like I didn't read through it like verbatim, but I'm skimming through it. I'm like, this is just how the vegetation, the vehicles, the buildings, and people are like, oh my God, look, the government's talking about vegetation, vehicles, and building. They must be doing their job. Like, it's just assumed that the people who wrote that document know what they're talking about, and then that, as a consequence, this is why we should raise your taxes. You should give us more money so we can fund these programs that we just talked about, like the magical thing we talked about before this podcast was high altitude water storage, which is one of the funniest things I have ever heard coming from a representative going, there are people out there who are literally trying to spend millions of taxpayer dollars for a snow machine just to deplete our groundwater resources in the mountain areas even more without thinking about the actual environmental consequences of doing those things.
Well, no, they just it was just ski resorts wanting the taxpayers to pay for their snowmaking. Yes. I mean, they're going to do it anyways. And it's like, well, wait a second. If we could, somebody at some point with the cigarettes and coffee, or probably it was marijuana and coffee if it's the ski industry. So they were sitting around. It's like, man, we spend all this money. And then somebody said, you know what? You know who's stupid is people who believe in this anthropogenic climate change. And if we tell them that we're going to, store in the mountains to rehabilitate the water table, it's like they'll give us money to run our snow machines, and then we can ski on it and pack it down. We'll even do them a favor and pack it down with our snow machines and let them ski on it and stuff. And we'll just charge this, I don't know who has investments in the ski industry that might have put something forward like that to see if it sticks on the wall. But
weird. I wonder who that person would be.
There are people that are heavily invested in the ski industry that, drive a lot of policy, like the like the bus, we talked about the buses, to deplete, to fix the ozone problem. And so what's the ozone problem? Well, we don't actually know. We just know the ozone is a problem. And the way to fix it is by giving $17 million to buses, because they're only subsidized at $2 per passenger mile. And if you look at, I think I figured it out in my boson bill, because it was, no offense about bozo, but it's just, buses and ozone just combines to boson. Is that, basically one of these battery operated buses is, they're not really smoothing out traffic, because, I mean, look at the line of cars behind him. And I don't know how many wrecks occur because somebody like zips out, thinks they can zip out in traffic and they don't see that one car. But they're effectively like 50 cars just piled on top of each other, lumbering slowly in the wrong direction at all times, right?
Yes.
You have to walk to them, and they're subsidized at $2 per passenger mile. So now we could, when I looked at Uber and Lyft, they were $1 to $2 per passenger mile. So I'm assuming that the $2 is like, if you get the, you want to arrive in the limo looking Uber, you're gonna pay more. So we could literally, because they'll say, the buses, they're really important. They always throw disabled veterans, LGBT, endangered mammals. That's who really needs to.
So
we have to
the LGBTQ people and endangered mammal.
I threw the endangered mammals in there, but they throw everybody else in. It's like, what would be really good for a disabled veteran would be if the vehicle showed up at his house and he didn't have to wheel himself. Yeah. So like the elderly, it's like, the elderly really need the buses because they can't have personal vehicles. A lot of them have gotten rid of their personal vehicles. So it's like, at all times of day, all kinds of weather, your solution is that they should walk the half mile
to the bus place.
So we can subsidize them at $2 per passenger mile to amble slowly and clog up traffic with a, division like 50 cars piled up with 5 drivers, because that's usually about how many riders there are. That bus represents, the bus itself, maybe $100,000, so 20 vehicles itself with 5 riders. Like that's what it is effectively. And so instead, I'm just guessing that the elderly would be okay with saving $1 per passenger mile by just having Uber pick them up. You could say, hey, you know what? You've given up your I want to drive card. So, maybe instead of subsidizing buses at $2 per passenger mile, you could subsidize the gig economy at $1 per passenger mile. I'm not for subsidizing it all. I mean, I think you have to pay at some point, otherwise you just get largesse. But, disabled veterans, elderly, and I suppose even LGBT would prefer being picked up at their door and dropped off at their destination, as opposed to having to walk between the two of them. And, after getting a slow tour of Colorado Springs on a mobile crack den, we have bus drivers that don't want to drive buses anymore because, it's like trying to recruit bus drivers. Like, well, they don't want to drive because it's like all the crime that goes on.
It's
right.
It's a mobile crack den, Representative.
Yeah, it's a mobile crack den. Yeah. And so then you say to people, so then what they do with policy, and they go, well, we need to, the buses, they recognize this. I mean, you look at Woodrow's policy on transit-oriented housing, right? And what you have to do is you have to take the hook, which is government control, wrap it in some emotive bait, right? And then the politicians, they're just going to take whatever money. And even when they disagree, they refer to him as King Polis because he apparently has absolutely no appreciation for any other branch of government. It's just what he says. And what he says, he sends out through the Policites. So, I mean, there's really not like multiple entities. There's Jared Polis, and then there's his sub entities, or what I call the Policites, who just do his do his bidding largely. They break off, but they'll tell you it's like, yeah, I agree with you, but I have to go this way, otherwise they'll primary me. Who will primary you? Well, Polis will primary me. So, when his shtick is kind of being the avuncular libertarian elf, but his policies are pure leftist. So him and his what I call leftislators,
you're just all about those zingers. This is hilarious. Like, this is genuinely funny to me. Like, the Policites and the left. Oh man, this is hilarious. So,
well, if you don't have the right word, I think it's important to just be able to make it up. I mean, really,
they
Webster
make up their own legislation and rob your tax dollars anyway, so you might as well start making stuff up anyway.
Absolutely.
But you bring up something that's really important about it. When you're talking about these notions, like, you're talking about things that stick with people's minds. Like, when you say Policites, like, oh, that'll stick in some voters' mind, right? I mean, you're running in Colorado District 22, right? You're trying to basically save this part of America. And, one thing that I have seen, especially through this whole debacle with even the GOP over the past couple months that you and I have both been partaking in, is that there is just a group of people that want to try to maintain control for their own self-benefit. They don't understand. They don't understand service. They don't understand sacrifice. If you're an elected representative, you better be showing up to work if I put you there. And to see the abstention and the refusal to participate in their own representative, republic here. And then as a result of this, we see bad policies being passed. And then you have a very small majority or select individuals, and I'm sure you know who I'm probably referring to, who will go out there and spew nonsense on the news or on certain media sites, and then they're getting all the attention. And as a guy who works in psychological operations and intelligence, that's my job in the Army, right? These are coordinated disinformation campaigns to an uneducated population. And one thing that I've seen, especially against people like you, who are actually educated, know what they're talking about, and actually have a common sense approach to governance, which is, I don't need to do this job. I'm only doing it because I was asked to by the people who respect me, right? Because they want me to go in there and make changes. And then you go in and you start having rational discussions of, like, this climate change thing in Colorado's BS. Hey, the snow machine guys at the ski resorts are trying to scam you out of your tax dollars, right? Just common sense observations. And then all of a sudden you're getting attacked. You are the bad guy. You are the one that, no matter what, they're going to try to oust your position or try to find some dirt on you or whatever else it is. Because they are genuinely afraid, especially of, like, educated combat veterans coming in to serve in government, because they have life experience. They've walked outside the country. They've been outside the state of Colorado. They know that there's other people outside that exist other than themselves. And they're generally threatened by people like you. I've seen it. I've watched everything that they say about you online and how they attack you. I sit there and go, no offense, but the guy's just a fighter pilot nerd from the Air Force Academy who just, wants to take care of his family and his kids and thinks everything that you're doing is stupid. and then they get offended by it.
Well, I told my wife the other day with all politics stuff with the GOP, it's like all this stuff that's going on reminds me of why I went into engineering. And it wasn't, I thought going into engineering and then going into aviation was like the perfect way to keep me out of politics. So, yet here I am.
Here you are. So, Ken, you're getting ready for this election coming up. You have someone running against you. We've talked about
an Air Force retired clone. So they the funny thing is going through his it's like they put an Air Force guy against me. It's an Air Force area, that makes sense. Well, he's retired. He's got a family. Clean cut looking family. Not like Kamala Harris with the the freakazoid in there. But the funny thing is that he basically just refers to me as like that he says I'm not too conservative, which is funny. And then he does some quotes of Reagan, and that that I'm rude, and which is funny because I really do get along with most everybody on the on the Democrat side. I mean, I have had good conversations with them. I've actually, been effective in, I think in having, bringing a historical perspective, and a lot of my historical perspective, has, come from, I don't know if the author, Air Force Academy grad also, and he used to teach ethics across the Air Force. Pen name, nom de plume, Justin American, Justin.
Yep.
Super, just anytime one of my constitutional resources. But I have good rapport with all of them, and there's a few, so funny thing is that Pearson refers to me as not a true conservative, yet he endorses Stephanie Vigil, who is on, I mean, she's a true leftist later. She is hard left, has absolutely no idea about science. Every time I give the numbers on, what your actual climate footprint contribution is, she'll just say there's an existential threat. And it's like, okay, there might be an existential threat in the climate. I don't know, but your contribution to it is 1/2 part in a trillion. And so yes, there's that guy, and he's trying to, so he wants to make me seem, extreme, but I get along with Duran, I get along with Bacon. I mean, we have, I tell them their policies are guano loco, but I have good rapport with all of them. So, Vigil hates me, but I wouldn't.
She hates me.
She
hates me too, so it's fine.
Yeah.
It was really funny. I was at some event the other day, and there was some reporter in the room, and then she takes a picture of me claiming that I'm a lobbyist from DC, and says all this crap about me on Twitter. And I'm like, oh, you were that person standing in the corner taking pictures of me, huh? Well, because ironically, so one of the things I work for on the federal legislative side is I work for sexual assault and retaliation reform at our federal service academies. That's one of the big things I've been pushing at the Air Force Academy, West Point, Annapolis, whatever else. So I as a courtesy, I email like all the state representatives, hey, we're going to DC to do this lobbying bill. Would you like to endorse it? And Stephanie Vigil blatantly said, no, I will not support this bill. Like, good on you for trying, but I will not support this bill. So then this reporter,
I don't remember that email, but I'm also.
I definitely sent it to you. But like I said, that's not for this conversation. We'll talk about the Dorito Act later on when it comes.
Oh, I saw you refer to that later at someplace in a recent email. It's like, I don't know what this Dorito Act is.
Oh, yes,
okay.
Ken. Yeah. So, but anyway, the funny thing is that this reporter putting out blatant disinformation about Vigil, she's like, This lobbyist from DC is claiming that Stephanie Vigil doesn't support our rape survivors in the military in Colorado Springs. I'm like, okay, but she doesn't. And actually, I have her email right here with her name stamped on it saying, I do not and I will not support this bill. And I sat there and just went, any further questions? And then they started like trash talking me on, you know how politics works. They just come after you after that. And I sat there and just went like, hey man, I have the receipts. So I don't know what to tell you. Here's her name. She signed it. She said she's not going to support the bill. So moving forward, obviously for her constituents, it's a very military dense area. Fort Carson, Schriever, Peterson, the Air Force Academy, everything else. You don't support those people who are going through issues with their respective leadership. And this is something we're trying to reform. So how do you say you represent the people that you were elected to represent when you don't agree with them? So I don't know what to tell you. Sorry, Representative Vigil, but, these are the people you have to deal with, right? And then everything is an existential crisis, or we have this carbon stuff and the LGBTQ transgender stuff that's going on in schools and stuff. I mean, what I encourage voters to do, and I said breaking it down on that 5th grade level, is just go look up your representative and look at their voting record. Yeah, it's not that hard.
Liberty Scorecard is a great way to do that. And Liberty Scorecard is one of those things that Eli Bremer said was just something that was invented to make Republicans look bad. Like, how is it? They, they list their criteria for the bills. Correct. They list all the bills. They tell you what they are, why they voted against them. Instead of just trash talking, why don't you come to the table with, I disagree here. I mean, I disagree with them. I mean, they rated me high, but we had disagreements, and there were times where I would email them and say, I disagree with you. I'm voting against you on this, and they'd say, okay, we're not perfect. We admit we're not perfect. You have different information, and you know, but that's a good one. Colorado Union of Taxpayers is another way to that people can look at it and see what their how their representative is voting. Both really good. There's other ones.
I think it's
I
super
think.
important though, as a voter, you need to be educated. And like one thing that people pencil up all the time is even like selecting judges. No, please, for the love
Mhm.
of God, please look up the judges and at least read their Wikipedia or something before you vote. It's just a blind ignorance to this whole so-called democracy that they think they're a part of, where a lot of people are not participating in politics. I've talked to a lot. I was even at Red Rocks last night, and you talk to like all these people signing up to register people, registering people to vote. And you actually try to have an actual conversation with them, and most of them are what I saw at Red Rocks was like leftist organizations, but people don't want to have the actual hard conversations about what's going on in their community. People are just like, oh yeah, I'm just going to register this. I'm going to vote for this, person because I got other things to do. And what I think Americans are failing to understand is you have a responsibility. Are you a resident or are you a citizen? When you're a resident, you're sitting around, you're existing, you're going to concerts, you're taking care of things, whatever else, but you're not paying attention to the government and participating in civil process. But when you're a citizen, you have a responsibility to vote, be responsible to your community, the representatives that elect you, and making sure that your business and economies in the local areas are thriving. So that's the question I always ask people: is are you just going to exist or are you going to participate? Because if you don't participate, then you're going to get a bunch of uneducated people who are just going to manipulate you into making snow machines, and then round the circle we go with taxes and inflation and economies failing and everything else. And I think you're trying to do the hard work against the person that you're running against, or is trying to run against you. And I just blows my mind watching the people that come out and attack common sense representatives, right? It just doesn't make any sense. They're afraid of their power getting taken away. They're afraid of losing their influence. They're afraid of
Mhm.
losing their money laundering machine. And I'm just saying that being honest. Like I even in Weld County, I live in so-called the most conservative area of Colorado. Yet three of the major companies I used to work with and for have closed down. Schlumberger, Baker Hughes, and Noble Energy are gone. And
Yeah.
I'm talking millions, if not billions of dollars of revenue in this state. Schlumberger literally sold off all of their assets and left and sold it to Liberty, and now they're gone in the North
Mhm.
American asset. Baker Hughes had to merge with somebody else, and Noble Energy sold off to Chevron because even that so-called mom and pop, largest private oil and gas producer in the country, couldn't survive in the
Mhm.
drilling moratoriums and all this climate change nonsense. And what is that doing? That you're just affecting hundreds of thousands of jobs, whether it's truckers, electricians, pipes, pipe fitters, welders, everything else. But then Denver wants to call Weld County and say, well, we need more of your water. And
Yeah.
also, and one thing I saw that was fascinating, which I'm sure you've seen, was this whole,
Does it feel like Hunger Games a little bit, where you're this outlying county, and then you have you have the people in the capital that are making all these rules and dressing outlandishly to impose all this stuff on you, and then tap the labor, which is in line with the Communist Manifesto, where you have you just have labor armies of the you have proletariat labor armies after you've eliminated the bourgeoisie, the middle caste. So it's all, I mean, it's
half
all
the labor
fitting.
unions, half the labor unions in the state wouldn't exist without the oil and gas industry supporting them. And I'm
Oh
talking
yeah,
about like
yeah.
the electricians, the welders, the pipe fitters, and all these other places. But like, here's a classic example of something that I saw pass. And I'm sure you saw this energy policy pass too, where basically everyone in the Denver metro area and the non oil and gas producing counties were very upset with Weld County and Adams County because they were making billions of dollars of revenue, and our stuff's paid for in cash. We have a nice police department. We have lower taxes on our housing and everything else because we live in the free state of, we call it the free state of Weld because we've tried to secede to Wyoming a few times. And we support the major oil and gas industries out here, and they support us. But then you see this drilling moratorium come in. And in 2017, it was really bad in Adams County. They wanted to ban, all this drilling and stuff. And they did it. And I remember at that representative meeting, I said, I actually hope that you pass this drilling ban so you all get fired, because people's taxes are going to go up and people's food prices are going to go up, and there's going to be no more jobs, which is why everyone no offense, but unless you work in ag or oil and gas, you don't live in Weld County just for the fun of it, right?
Right.
But then you see what happened in Adams County is that their housing prices skyrocketed. They actually had to build more communities to raise taxes on more people moving out of North Denver because they lost all of that tax revenue from the oil and gas companies that stopped drilling because they passed it. And I was even talking to one of the county commissioners last week. He's like, yeah, so remember that speech you gave in 2017 at the county commissioners meeting? Well, you were right, and now we're broke. Adams County and Weld County used to have all this money, and now they're being forced to disperse it around the state. And I'm sure you've seen this. So from what has recently passed, is that people got jealous that we were making all this money, and they believe that they were entitled to it. The Stephanie V. Hills, they want the money. They believe oil and gas should pay their fair share. So now the two largest oil producing counties are now forced to take all of their revenue that they make from oil and gas, basically, and there's a lot more technicalities to this, but distribute it between all of the municipalities in Colorado. So the whatever LGBTQ fishing and wildlife department down in Alamosa County can get some of that oil and gas money because it's environmental racism that we don't give it to them. So they've basically they've distributed all of the money from the oil and gas producing areas, and now they have lowered the revenue available in our counties to support our residents. Right. And now my taxes went up $800 this year on my property because of that, because I have to now we have to give the money that we worked for. We have to give it away to other counties because they think they're entitled to it. And another thing that you talk about with all these local government things is the theft of tax dollars because people aren't paying attention. And something I saw in Weld County that another representative that I was talking about with brought up was that there's two major dangerous intersections on Highway 34, 25, and everything else up here. And the federal government was offering this program to come in, and they were going to, if you can come up with 60% of the funds or whatever it was, that the federal government would help support this. So Greeley and Weld County, they raised prices on food, where the taxes on food specifically, and it was only supposed to be for 10 years in order to build up a large amount of money to supplement the federal subsidy to revamp Highway 34 and make it safer, to reduce accidents, widen it, build overpasses and everything else because it's a major highway thoroughfare. So they did that. They raised the prices on food in Greeley and Weld County for 10 years. And then they made all this extra money, $54 or $58 million, whatever they needed to do. And then they were supposed to get the subsidy from the federal government to reconstruct the roads. And then the city of Greeley and Weld County decided to go in and spend all that money on building parks instead. And now they're putting a ballot initiative out there that says, well, we're not going to raise your taxes. This tax already exists. But we want to keep this food tax in perpetuity in order to keep funding our roads for safety and for diversity. And then I sit there and go, wait a minute, I thought I lived in Weld County. What the hell is going on? And then you show up to this county commissioners meeting, you're like, how did you even get elected in this position? It's because people are asleep at the wheel. They're not paying attention to what's going on in their local government. And everyone wants to care about Donald Trump or all these federal races. Yeah, I guess that's important. But at the end of the day, people like you need to be elected into office, because if you don't elect people with common sense approaches to legislation that can reach across the aisle and have these discussions with people without them even realizing are going to have their taxes raised, and these businesses are closing down, and then we're going to have food taxes to build a highway or a bridge to nowhere, which is, I guess, basically a better reference, to build a bunch of artistic
train to
parks.
nowhere. Train to nowhere.
And now we're having all these like art projects in parks in Weld County, and we're spending millions of dollars watering grass instead of like fixing the roads and lowering taxes. And now, like, you see the fentanyl issue, right? You see all the drug issues. I mean, one thing I'd like to hear your opinion on was what has been going on. All these Venezuelan gangs are moving into Denver metro areas, actually affecting citizens. Yesterday alone, MS-13, which is another gang, is now offering to fight the Venezuelan Tres de Aragua gangs to push them out, because the local police departments in Aurora and Jared Polis are saying there's nothing going on. This is all disinformation campaigns. When you're literally watching roving gangs driving around in Suburbans with megaphones, fighting each other in the streets. And it's absolute chaos to what some of these representatives and local government officials have brought to the state of Colorado with zero accountability.
Well, there's, I don't know what the buses were for, but they were, when we were riding to the Capitol, there was, like, depending on what time, depending on traffic and all that, there was always a bus from El Paso, Texas, going north and into Denver. And I thought, and one time I was just behind enough and said, well, I wonder where this bus is going. Well, it got off at exit 210, I think A, which is the same one we get off to go onto the Capitol. And if you go to the right, there's a bus station right there. Like, there's the bus depot right across from the Capitol. So I thought, oh, well, whatever, why ever a busload of, and then on the way back, going the opposite direction of this bus going north is another bus, Los Limousines, going back towards El Paso. So there's this conveyor belt of, I'm guessing that they're sports enthusiasts from El Paso, Texas, that are, because instead of going towards the bus depot where like you would normally think you would offload, they went towards the stadium. Now, I don't know if they went to the stadium. I didn't follow them, but they went towards the stadium. So that's why I say they must be sports enthusiasts, because yes, I think they went to the stadium and were coming back from the stadium, and they were passing. Now, I suspect those buses were full, as opposed to like our buses when you typically see them and they've got about 5 people on them. But we're finding out now that when they said, oh no, we're not, sanctuary, but they have a whole program for importing newcomers. And they were, the euphemism of newcomers. And anytime you would say like illegal aliens, which like, hey, an alien, somebody from another country, they're here illegally, they're illegal aliens. It's, it's not, it doesn't take away from their status being Imago Dei, created in the image of God, and that we should treat, anybody that's here with respect and dignity and all that. But a lot of that respect and dignity comes from, goes along with not having an open border where they are exploited for their money, because the cartels control the border, and and they're forced to to endure these horrible things where, like what, 50,000 kids have come up missing. They gave the pictures of Obama's, border stuff where the kids were in cages, blamed it on Trump, didn't bother him that it was actually Obama. But, talking to some of the people that have been on these buses, like, on these caravans that are coming up, describing, young girls that are being basically raped on the bus, and they can't say anything, because if they say anything, they'll get kicked off the bus, and yes, or left in the desert or whatever. So we create this inhumane process by which people are brought here. So, Denver, I was thinking about a bill to say, to like have a, and I think I posted on Twitter, but, having a sign outside your home that would be like, hey, I'm open to having, migrants come and stay in my house. And the sign would say things like, thinking something like rainbow colors, like saying, love is love. No one is illegal. We believe in science. You could put that in your yard. And then as long as you had that in your yard, it would be like saying you had room in your home for newcomers, right? So, that maybe I'll present that again. But when going back, I wanted to just say, vigilance is hard. That's the price for liberty. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. Vigilance is hard. We lost it. That's why we are where we are. I'm guilty. I thought just voting for Republican meant you voting for people with Republican values, as opposed to, just an R, capital R, that's in the middle of the word opportunist.
Yes.
That too often is, I think, what the R means. So, but I was just as guilty. And, people don't want to be engaged. They want to live their lives. They want to go out. They want to take care of their families. They want to have a job. They want to recreate. They want to, they have no idea. When people come and, I talk to people, one of the first things I like to ask them generally, so spoiler alert here, here's the quiz, is how many bills do you think are passed in a year? Like, you have 100 legislators, roughly 100 days, with days, time off, weekends, etc. How many bills? And I mean, the answer. I'm assuming the answer, correct?
It's a lot less than people think it is.
Yeah, but But normally people will say, well, I think 100 legislators in 100 days could really, get to work on like 10 bills. And then they'll be like, then they think it's a school answer. And then it's like, maybe if they were really like nose to the grindstone, they could do like 50. And then when I tell them, no, it's 500 to start, you can just see their heart just sink, because they know that there is not 500. And then it's like, that's just a start. We considered 500. I mean, I'm allocated.
You posted a picture about that the other day, right? I mean, I even commented on your Facebook, where it's like, this is the end of the Colorado legislative session this year compared to the previous year. And it's just books, literal books, stacks.
I think like 165,000 different regulations. So when you talk to people and they go, because they'll say, Junie will, of course, Junie wants me to get on her bills so that I won't talk on hers. Like when it was the, she want, on one of the bills, I got her on. It's like, well, but if I'm on your bill to help it get through, then you can't talk on my bill. And so I just that was one with the where she passed the legislation to make sure that we keep the grooming materials. And if you're not sure, if somebody's not sure, check it out, ratedbooks.org. You can go and see the, what the texts are that the Democrats want to keep. That is, I mean, it is literal grooming material. There are books in your public library or your pubic library, whatever you want to call it, that are more fitting to be in an adult bookstore. I mean, I don't know, but I'm guessing that they should be more in an adult bookstore. But they want the bipartisan, because you'll hear like Jared Polis like, oh, well, this bill was bipartisan. It's like, why do we keep voting for this stuff? If it doesn't align with the values of the Republic, we should not be voting for it. And they'll say, well, if I don't vote for it, then my bill won't get passed. It's like, well, that's,
And the thing is like, there's also, especially since you guys aren't even like this isn't even like federal Congress, right? This is like state Congress. You only work like 100 days a year, passing these bills and stuff. There is no way that you are reading 500 to 1,000 bills and making sure everything's in the best interest of the people of Colorado. It's just, it's not. It's a giant like grinder where self-interests and opportunists are coming in to try to put different legislation, and some of it's good, but a lot of it's nonsense. I think
most.
I think a lot of it. It was kind of funny because somebody even commented on your Facebook that looks like a lot of restriction of my civil liberties that you guys are passing over there. You know what I mean? It's like even people talk about like single issue spending bills and everything else. And I think that's so important to even have that discussion about simplifying government, breaking it down to a fifth grader level. You know what I mean? Why are we having these massive amounts of bills and literature? It's just to confuse people. Look, you should pass this bill because it's 80 pages thick and it's 100% in your best interest, but don't read it because you're not smart enough.
Well, when you say single subject, yes, you are required to have single subject bills. And, so really it shouldn't have an "and" in the title, but some of these bills literally have a title that's half a page long. And then, there's 100 pages behind it, but it covers absolutely it just goes in all kinds of directions. And then they'll say, well, we're going to limit discussion on this bill to 2 hours. Like, you can't even read it in 2 hours. You can't,
right.
You can't. And then say somebody puts an amendment on that is a page long, like all throughout it. And it's like, you can change the entire nature of the bill, just like on Junie Joseph's bill about keeping the porn in public libraries. It has one sentence in there, and I have it in the book, that basically, the entire bill reads like it should be, allow, to allow review of these books to get them out of the libraries if the citizens reject. But there's one sentence in it that I tried to have eliminated that basically makes it so that if the libraries choose not to have a review committee, because it's libraries that do have a review process, then they can do this, or then they must do this, which means, so when I told the lawyer, it's like, I want an amendment to take this sentence out. She said, well, that would make it, then it would make, reviews mandatory for all libraries. Like, yeah. So you have this entire 12-page bill that looks like it's supposed to be one thing, one sentence makes it mean the entire opposite thing. So then you take a 100-page bill and then you change a page worth of punctuation, sentences, and all that stuff. And then all of a sudden so the bill that you were talking about in committee is now a completely different bill. And it's just going to go through with, and I pointed this out during the session, is that, most of the seats are empty. They're not there, they're not there listening. And, the majority of the Republicans are there. They might have to be gone for, a moment or two, but, the 19 of us are there listening to the policy and what we're doing. Most of the Democrats are out because they're just going to vote the way they're told to, or it's going to be a voice vote. One thing I wanted to mention on the taxes is, I have had people, tell me, it's like, well, how come you voted against this bill? And one of the reasons I voted against the bill in this, what I call the extraordinary session, they like to call it special session, special extraordinary session. Like it's,
like
well,
Poppins.
if you do it 2 years in a row, it's not special and it's not extraordinary. It's just the normal fall extra session that costs taxpayers $100,000 or more to just for us to be in the building doing that for the 4 days. Right. And but they kept lamenting how Colorado is like number 47 in property taxes, and then going and looking at, it's like they have this perverse idea, like it's like, wow, we just don't have enough. So we're there ostensibly to lower property taxes, which the Democrats fought the entire way. We're only there because the two Props 150 and 108, which, for whatever problems they would have at least been constitutional. They're only there in a special session because they're afraid 50 and 108 would pass. And so they'd rather make a deal on less tax relief to the citizens than get a constitutional. And then Lorena Garcia, full up leftist later, she brings a bill forward, and they quickly talked her down, like the deal is not going to go through if you push this bill. Well, part of her bill was like changing the 10, there's weeping and gnashing of teeth about changing a 6 to 5.25 on the percentages. Well, her amendment would have changed some of the 10% to 14%, just, straight across with an axe. So it's like, so these Democrats that hate any tax relief whatsoever, and then, you tell them, it's like, well, we had low property tax because we were literally pumping money out of the ground. The school system was funded on money pumped out of the ground, hydrocarbons pumped out of the ground. And when you oxidize those to release the stored energy, you get carbon dioxide and water, which make plants grow and have, water is water vapor is your primary greenhouse gas. But that's why we had a low tax rate. But going back to, all they have to do is next session, and I would be surprised if it hadn't, that she didn't just take that amendment, have it redrafted into a bill that goes into the tax code, and then changes all the 10s to 14%. So this extraordinary session that cost taxpayers at least $100,000 for us to go there and machinate so the Democrats could try to figure out how to give less tax relief. They can easily turn in the next session into a progressive tax code monstrosity. And a progressive tax code, I think, it's either number 1 or number 2 on Karl Marx's list of ways to get rid of the middle class. And so that's one of the reasons that I voted against it. It has no constitutional protection. They're always trying to get past, beyond Tabor. So they can just turn this loose next year, and like we spent $100,000 to give you less tax relief than you would have if you would have just kept the ballot initiatives, and then next year we're going to really stick it to you because we're the Democrats are so upset they say we're supposed to always say we and all that. It's like, no, it's not me. It's you that is raising the taxes. And it's, $40 billion, $25,000 per family, up about $10,000 from when Jared Polis took office. So, but they're generally upset that in the comparative politics with other states, that Colorado is so low on property taxes. It's like they have a sense of shame that they don't have a higher property tax here in Colorado. So anybody thinks that the Democrats or Jared and the Policites are thinking about, are interested in any form of tax relief, just, you need to watch the session, because there's not only no interest in tax relief, there's just active lamenting that the taxes are not higher. And why? And they don't want to give any Tabor money back. How do they get rid of Tabor? And of course, getting rid of Tabor would remove any caps on taxes, so that no matter what they tax, there would never be any excess. And so that would break that all loose. Then they could really go to town on taxing Colorado like they would like to.
Absolutely. And something that really concerned me too the other day was hearing even so-called Republican representatives out there advocating to pass this. Oh, we're going to get like immediate like tax relief now, and then like it's totally not going to change later on. I'm like, well, did you read what you guys are down there to do in special session? You know what I mean? Like, it blows my mind that there's even such a low comprehension level of what's going on down in the state capitol right now for the people that were elected to take those positions and represent their own people.
There were things that were beneficial. Advanced Colorado was, the primary. I mean, they had created Props 50 and 108, and they were, the prime negotiators in the in this bill. It did help to know that the leftist leader in chief, Chris Hansen, was pretty much sidelined. Like, his name is on the bill. But Advanced Colorado basically said they told him to sit down, shut up, and color, because, I mean, one, none of his ideas are good at all, and if any of his ideas got into the bill, the deal wouldn't have been passed. So why he was on the bill, I don't know, just because he, that's, something he meddles in all the time, when they put together like 233 at the, in the waning hours of the session, slap it together on a bunch of napkins piled together, and then turn it into a law. Like, as Advanced Colorado said, it's like, this is getting 2/3 of what we wanted out of that. So there is the sense of, bird in hand, two in the bush. But this bird in hand, I'd say, it's worth the paper that it's written on. It's worth the people that you're dealing with. You have to be dealing in good faith that this isn't going to change. And what you're dealing with the Democrat legislators is they are, which of course my opponent wants to go and help smooth flow their operations, and be a leftist later himself, that they're not good faith actors. No. In fact, they tipped their hand and said, we're going to want to change this in the next session. And anybody that came up was saying that this, giving tax relief was a bad deal. It wasn't a bad deal for Colorado. Colorado wants it. They were, they're worried about them. Now, Stephanie Vigil did have like one salient point that I mentioned, in that, you do get most of your value out of your local taxes, right? Your schools, your libraries, sure. Your fire and all that stuff. You get most of your value out of the local. So that's why I tried to put together the amendment, and they wouldn't allow me to present it. That would just take $1 billion out of the state's budget, which is $40 billion. Like, take 2.5% off all of the programs. You can fund the majority of this. Okay, so the governor's trained to nowhere, takes a 2.5% cut, but you get to fund the fire districts. Now, the fire districts and all the other special districts, they were all funded at, those are all made to circumvent Tabor, and and they, and that, Weissman's bill would have turned all 4,800 of these little taxing jurisdictions into a little constitutional fiefdoms, which would be entertaining, but it would be an absolute mess. So, but yeah, you're not dealing with good faith actors. They want to raise the taxes. They can't stand to see any tax cuts, and they can't see that there's any largesse in the in the state $40 billion, which again is about $40 billion divided by 4 million voter, about $10,000 per voter per year. And they cannot get their spending under control to stay inside of that. And that's in addition to the unfunded mandates that they push down on the counties.
I mean, literally, Colorado is actually turning into its own South Park episode yet once again, where Canada comes in and says that they need more money, and well, how do we get more money? Well,
Canada comes to South Park and says we need more money.
Okay. Canada's going on strike, and it's like Colorado's going to go on strike. It's like, well, why is Canada going on strike? Well, we need more money. Okay, well, go do something about it. Go build industry. No, we're just going to go on strike. Canada's going to go on strike, and you guys are going to give us some of that money. Well, what money? Maybe some of that internet money. And it's like that's how I see Colorado's politics being run right now. It's like, well, we need more money. Well, why? Why can't you utilize the money from the taxpayers efficiently now? Make cuts, be responsible governance. Uphold the Constitution for the love of God. Somebody just do their freaking job. And they're no, we just need more money. If you give us more money, we promise that we'll 100% not screw it up this time.
100%. Yeah. We have 4-star gig drivers that are running the economy now, and nothing against gig drivers, but nobody calls Uber and says, I'd like some tax policy advice. This is
no.
And you don't wait on tax policy till the last 3 days in session. And that's how you really know what the governor's priorities are. Right. Like, you listen to his speech, you hear his bills, you hear his proposals, and then you wait until the last 3 days, to see what drops in the last 3 days. A priority bill is given minimum time, so it has to be rushed through. So it gets little to no scrutiny. It will have, it'll have 50 different amendments to change everything it says as it goes through. That's how you find out that's where the 233 comes in. That's where, transit-oriented communities come in. Transit-oriented communities, by the way, if anybody doesn't know, that is basically there's a couple different things that it would do. And what is the purpose of it? It's to prop up the buses, to make buses profitable. How do you make buses profitable? Well, more ridership. How do you get more ridership? Because nobody wants to ride the mobile crack dens going and lumbering slowly in the wrong direction. So a free market person, the exchange of good for good, would do something like, hey, I'm going to make this, I'm going to do some research, and I'm going to figure out what would make people want to do ridership. Well, the Democrats are leftists. They just know that their ideas are really good and that they would solve all the problems if only they had all the power, right? That's right. Then they could build their totalitopia, right? If they had all the power, yeah, sure, their policies fail in the in the small frame, but the failure at the small level just means they need more power to impose it at the large level, right? So the transit-oriented communities would do a few things. And Jared, this goes back to Jared Polis's priorities. I'm going to solve the traffic problem. Well, how do you solve the traffic problem? Well, you take a 2-lane road and you make it 1 lane and make it a bike lane, right? Now, those people aren't paying gas taxes, which are paying for the roads. But anyways, you're gonna make it a bike lane, because that works great in the wintertime. And then you take every road, and West Side Watch is an excellent organization. They do a lot of research in this. And then you take you take a half-mile diameter bubble and follow it along every bus route, right? Mm-hmm. And then inside of that footprint of that half mile of in that half-mile radius of or diameter of a bus route, you change all of the zoning by fiat from Denver, right? This is, you give, zoning control now by fiat to the bureaucrats in Denver, and bureaucrats is spelled BURRO, and that's intentional because of all the jackassery. So you take that and then you change.
The funniest representative I've ever talked to. I've talked to a lot of members of Congress, even on the federal side on Capitol Hill, and just your one-liners, just slipping them in all the time. Like I'm like, why are we not electing more Ken DeGraffs? I don't understand. Can you imagine how much shit we would get done in Congress and in the state legislature side if you had a bunch of people who just didn't take everything so hard, didn't take things personally, went there to represent their people because they got to go home and take care of their kids. And they're just trying to pass legislation for the good of the people and get out of there and go home and stop wasting everybody's time. Like, can you imagine if we had an entire legislature full of Ken DeGraffs? Like, I don't know how that's possible, but I mean,
I think it'd be fun, but I think more of what we need to accomplish when people say, well, you're not an effective legislator, you didn't get a bill passed. I was like, really, you think we need more than 500 bills a year passed?
Exactly.
I think my effectiveness comes in when,
bills.
When you kill bills and you kill bills. I mean, Jared Polis doesn't come down to me and say, hey, we killed this because of what you said. But, you look at, what you bring up, and then, the House votes it through, and then the Senate gets rid of it, or somebody else vetoes it, or like in the energy bill, when there was the deal, and ultimately the deal that was cut was that, this is on the back of Weld County, is that, okay, the carbonistas will back off on their idiocy for a little while in exchange for like a $3 per barrel or something like that, whatever it was, that would go towards what? Oh, it would go towards the governor's train to nowhere and give another $5 billion, because
Correct.
the $5 billion from before that was going to get the train finished by 2017. Now you need another $25 billion to get it done by 2050. So what and of course, if you subsidize failure and incompetence, what you're going to get is more failure and incompetence.
Exactly.
And so it's like, so did we change out everybody that's in charge? Oh no, it's like, it's the same people. And, and what tracks are we going to use? Well, if we go to the west side of Colorado, there's already train tracks there. It's like, is that high-speed rail? Because you can't just put high-speed trains on not high-speed rail.
I mean, you can.
You can.
It's not going to work out well for you, but I mean, since we're making the rules up as we go in the state legislature and we're wasting everybody's time and money, why don't we just do it and see what happens? Why don't we just strap a rocket to it? Actually, let's call Boeing. I think Boeing would actually build the best high-speed rail on the existing, rails here in Colorado. I mean, we're at that level of idiocy.
Holloman has a great high-speed rail system, and now that high-speed rail system terminated in a 20-foot thick brick wall, which is really impressive to see. Something, like going supersonic and then hitting into a brick wall. But yeah, high-speed rail, high-speed trains on low-speed rail, that would work fantastic right up until it failed catastrophically. That would, which would be,
probably didn't
the
go
first
to any EI. They didn't go to any extra instruction.
They did not go to any instruction. No. It's like, yeah, you just put a fast train on that slow track. That's totally legit.
I mean, that's actually how we lost half the monuments. Marble building the in DC is if you go to Marble, Colorado, you can watch where all the train tracks failed. All these giant pieces of marble fell off into the canyons, and because the trains failed, and then they tipped over. And actually, every single monument in Washington D.C. is built from Marble, Colorado. And you could still go up to Marble, Colorado today and see where all the trains failed from carrying these massive, giant monoliths of marble and tipped over and crashed into the canyons. It's actually fascinating for people who didn't know that. Little fun fact about Colorado.
Wow, that would
But we could put high-speed rail there. We could put high-speed rail there. Nothing would go wrong.
And we could have more trails. We could have even more trains in the canyons. That would, and then like Soper brought up, so what happened when they took out the train tracks? Well, they sold it to developers who, just like, getting rid of the trolleys. Who got rid of the trolleys in San Francisco and all the cities? Well, Goodyear and, the tire companies got rid of those and they gutted them. Well, it's like, well, you can't just go rebuild them. You have something, if you want to get from the outskirts of town into the center of town, you're going to have to repurchase all of the old train railways. Well, and why? Because, you have an I-25 corridor that, that can take, so, you don't even know, you don't even know that anybody really wants to ride the train. And again, it's subsidized at $2 per passenger mile. This whole,
Well,
this
it's
whole,
gonna be like the snow train, right? Oh, we're gonna bring the snow train back. It's gonna be so perfect and awesome. And they bring it back, and there's like like a couple people that go on it. It's useless because it only goes to one area. It doesn't solve anybody's problems at all, and it's more like a touristy thing now. We're gonna take the train to the snow town, and that's okay.
yeah.
Great, thanks for spending all that
Well,
money. Amtrak
well,
doesn't
people
care.
are, yeah, yeah. People are having to work two jobs to pay the taxes after they've made full-time full-time work will be 28 hours, so that everybody has benefits if you work over 28 hours. So what did that do? Well, that made all the businesses that weren't going to survive under that cut their employees below 28 hours. So now they have to have two employees. So then they that boosts up the that. So now people have to. And why do you need insurance? Well, you need insurance because Medicare jacks up the price of everything by 5 times. So, Medicare pays 20% of the of a cost. So then that means the medical community has to jack it up 5 times in order to not become a nonprofit organization. And in doing that, now you would have to pay 5 times if you were on the market. So the only way to not pay 5 times is for you to pay somebody else $2,000 a month in order for them to negotiate your price down closer to the Medicare rates. And then they charge you a 20% copay, which is effectively what the actual procedure costs before it's jacked up by 5 times in order to compensate. So you have these extra jobs. Why do you have to have extra jobs? You have to pay for healthcare. Why do you have to pay for healthcare? Why do you have to have healthcare insurance? Largely because Medicare has negotiated a rate for you that's otherwise 5 times higher than what they pay. So, the government negotiates against you. So I'm actually looking at trying to get some on, like, if you're a citizen of Colorado, there's your healthcare card. You don't have to pay for it. And you would actually get, be able to pay at on the Medicare schedule. And then, like, you pay cash on the Medicare schedule, the doctor gets paid, or the doctor can take whatever rate he wants. Because I've asked doctors and I've said, well, how come you don't just pay how come you don't just, you have $1,000 procedure that TRICARE or Medicare gives you $200 for? Why don't you just charge $200 and skip this whole, act? And they said, well, if we charge $200, they'll only pay us $40. Right. There's thousands of pages that determine how that's done. So you have this entire bureaucracy that is effectively negotiating against the citizens of the United States to make their medical costs higher. And then, of course, you say, well, what would the solution for a high medical cost be? Well, the natural solution would be to allow the people who made the problem to solve the problem, which,
Right.
which of course gives you a bigger problem. But that's the self-licking ice cream cone of the government is there's no problem the government can't make worse with a solution, right? So you make the problem worse, people come back to government to solve it. You make it worse, people come back, and where does that go? Well, now we have a $40 billion budget for Colorado alone, costing a family, a normal taxpayer about $10,000 either directly in taxes. Some people pay more directly in taxes or lost wages. It's, it's going to come out of you one way or the other. So about $10,000, $25,000 per year, and 165,000 different regulations that, we have to have so ultimately it's the bring me the man, I'll give you the crime. You're breaking the law somewhere. You just don't know it until, until the Gestapo shows up at your door and tells you what laws you're breaking. So.
No, I agree with you, Ken. I think this has been such a valuable and important discussion because it's very rare that people get to actually sit down, talk with the representative that represents them, and actually have these long form discussions about policy and making a few jokes, and versus the 10 to 5 second news cuts or Facebook posts or whatever BS these people put over the place. And as a USAFA guy too, like, even though that doesn't mean anything, I just appreciate your continued service. I mean, you don't have to do this. You don't have to do this job. You absolutely do not need to do this job whatsoever. You can keep flying planes and having fun and hanging out with your family. But I think you've realized that we have a crisis here in Colorado, that smarter people need to be in government, because it's, at the end of the day, your only job is to say yes or no. Yes or no. Are we voting on this or are we not? And I think not enough people like you are saying no, that this is insanity, that we need to control spending, that we need to really look at what's impacting our communities here in Colorado. And I think you're the best choice for Colorado District 22. I mean, they're hands down. I mean, I haven't talked to anyone else that has the ability to have this type of conversation and put in all the one-liner zingers nonstop. I mean, no, I mean, I will vote for you because I think you're funny, because at least guys, government doesn't have to be so serious, right? It is serious. It affects everyone here. But at the end of the day, if you can't have people that are not self-interested, that genuinely want to help their communities, then we're going to keep having this massive debacle with wasting people's tax money and, buses and trains to nowhere and everything else. And I think you're doing the work, Ken. I think you're going out there and actively speaking on these things, and you're reaching across the aisle and you're having the discussions with the people who don't even like you. And that's
True.
okay. It's like talking to, Army people. It's fine. Like Air Force hates the Army and vice versa. It's whatever. You'll get over it. At the end of the day,
It's all about boots on the ground. I love flying the A-10, but it's all about boots on the ground.
Yeah, but if you mess with me, I have this trigger thing that makes this really cool noise, and it's way cooler, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we're all Americans, Ken, and I think that you're bringing an amazing perspective into government. That's what we need. We need more people who think like you to actually help save this country, save this state from all the chaos that's been going on for the past couple of years. So where can people find you? Where can people connect with you if they want to have these discussions? And how do they need to know to make sure to vote for you in the general election coming up here in November?
Well, I think the big thing is to not be, like I said, the Democrat Pearson is, he's going to posit himself as a conservative, and you just have to know that he's actively endorsed Vigil, which, and then the unaffiliated Campagna, nice guy, I like him. We sat down for about 3 hours, talked policy. I'd say there's probably a lot of things we agree on. I was informed that he was endorsed by, ironically, Vigil in English and Exum, which, you have, okay, well, if you're endorsed by 3 leftist slaters, that, that kind of puts you on that side. And then potentially and then somebody said that he was planning on caucusing with the Democrats, which makes sense from the power standpoint. But at the same time, it's like, if you're going to sit on the side of the Democrats, you're just putting yourself under the control of Jared Polis and being a Polisite. Yeah, you might get more bills passed, but it's going to be at the expense of having to sell your soul and pass the, like the genital mutilation bills. We're anticipating certain of the Democrats trying to move the age of consent down to 12 years old for certain things like sterilization and feticide. They've already eliminated any sort of age of consent, so that all that goes down to toddler level now. So now you can do that. So Ken DeGraff, you can see the spelling, 2 A's, 1 F, the number 4, hd22.com is my website. And then Ken DeGraff .house at college.gov, CO as in Colorado, LEG as in legislature, .gov is where you can reach me on email. I'm on Twitter. I don't remember what that is right now. At CO, capital COREPK DeGraff, I think is the Twitter, is how it's spelled. So yeah, I like to go on there and poke at the Carbonistas and just see what their arguments are. They all just kind of fall apart when you position it, give it actual perspective and don't allow them to go off onto little tangents. So.
No, absolutely. Ken, I'm looking forward to working with you on energy policy moving forward. I really want to have these discussions and rope in, the energy communities again, to stop having people who don't understand how this stuff works, keep passing environmental regulations. And I think you're leading that forefront. You're a powerhouse and an important person in that perspective that we just don't see here in Colorado. So as an energy guy, I just want to say thanks. Thanks for sticking up for us and thanks for helping us.
I look forward to working with you. I'm trying to work. I'd like to work with ag as well, and
yep.
now if you actually, like an actual climate benefit of like carbon tax credits would be funding massive herds of cattle and to groom groom the grasslands, create a less expensive product, and reduce the fire hazard. So there's a lot of benefits across the board. So yeah, ag and oil. And so there's some of the ones that I'm really trying to reach, that, that they'll finally realize that, hey, wait a minute, we have been lied to, and we have been, and that, the emperor, this anthropogenic climate change thing, that emperor really has no clothes. And what it really requires is that people stand up to it and say, no, you need to show me what you got. You said you had scientifically based climate goals. You do not. You said that they have to be cost effective, and you're talking about trillions of dollars to affect a fraction of a degree. That is not cost effective. And I think ultimately that, it's going to take a lawsuit, because as I've demonstrated in the House, like on my Twitter, I'm a reluctant rep in the land where facts don't matter. The facts do not matter. As Rutenell, I need to have Manny Rutenell wants to have dinner with me sometime, so he can explain to me the policy, the important policy that hinges on this, that is based on a lie. So it's like, well, we've got important policy decisions that we have to make. So it's okay that we're lying about the climate change in order to force this. So at some point, he's going to explain to me what kind of policy that we need that is based 100% on a lie.
I couldn't agree more, Ken. That was a great way to sum up your positions. And like I said, you guys got to get out there and vote. Get out there, register to vote, start knocking on doors, doing what you got to do. But if you're living in Colorado District 22, you need to go out and vote for Ken DeGraff, because obviously he's the only few sane people we have trying to represent.
We do need people to door knock. You can either have representatives that are beholden to the people that get out and make phone calls and door knock, or you can have representatives who are beholden to special interests that pay people to get out and make phone calls and door knock. So we need volunteers. So contact me, and I'll put you in. We'll plug you in and help us with constitutional governance.
Yeah, and hopefully this podcast, people start listening to it, and they can get to know who Ken DeGraff is, because not everybody has an hour and 40 minutes to sit down with the great Ken DeGraff. But I do. This is awesome. So hopefully this helps, and hopefully people start listening to your policies and get to know you as the representative that they need. So thank you again so much, Representative DeGraff. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and I look forward to our continued conversations and South Park references. So
absolutely. All right, let's do this again sometime, Adam.
Will do.
All right. See you.